A Werewolf Shifter Romance Audiobook. Written by Catherine Stewart. Prologue. The air tasted of ash and terror. 7-year-old Lucia knew this taste intimately now. It coated her tongue, burned in her throat, and settled like a cold, heavy stone in her chest. She pressed herself deeper into the narrow space beneath the collapsed wooden beam, splinters digging into her cheek. Around her, the once sacred grove of the Whisper Wind Pack burned. Ancient trees roared in a symphony of destruction. Her parents told her to hide. Her mother, whose silver eyes usually held gentle wisdom, had squeezed her hand. Her voice was a fierce whisper. Stay hidden. Little song, be silent. Her father, a normally serene scholar, stood firm, his peaceful scent now laced with a desperate, metallic tang. Lucia clamped her eyes shut, trying to silence the terrifying symphony. Guttural snarls, strange, brutal wolves echoed through the flames, different from her pack's melodic calls. They moved with chilling efficiency, their crude banners, a twisted flame and claw, the mark of the shadow scars. She felt their intent, a discordant malevolent wave that vibrated through the earth, making her small body tremble. It was a noise, louder and more sickening than the crackle of fire, overwhelming her nascent Omega senses. This was what they wanted, to silence the songs of her people, to twist the balance. A memory flashed, sharp and cruel. Her mother's face, contorted in fear, but defiant, her voice suddenly strong. Whisper wind, then a brutal blow. Silence. Lucia whimpered, the sound barely audible, over the roaring inferno. She felt a flicker of warmth, an urge to push back against the consuming darkness. A nascent, intuitive sense that if she just pushed, the noise would stop. But a deeper, primal instinct, honed by pure terror, screamed suppress. Be silent. Hide. You are too much. This is your fault. Then came a new sound, a powerful deep growl, accompanied by a different scent. Pine and earth. Fierce, protective, cutting through the ash. A fleeting hope surged. Her parents had spoken of the Ironwood Pack, traditionalists. Honorable. But it was too late. The growl was drowned by the cacophony. The protective scent quickly tainted by blood and despair. The inferno consumed all. Hours later, long after the last screams died and only the embers glowed, Lucia lay still, playing dead amidst the ashes of her world. The pervasive malevolence of the shadow scars, though fading, lingered, a chilling promise of their enduring threat. The sweet, rain and old parchment scent of her lineage, and the subtle hum of her Omega power, retreated deep within her, buried under layers of ash and trauma. She was a silent ghost, a child who had seen the world burn, now convinced that her very nature was a beacon for destruction. All she had left was her silence, and the desperate, burning need to disappear. The air in the midnight diner always smelled the same. Stale coffee, burnt toast, and a faint, lingering antiseptic scent. Lucia found comfort in its predictability. Every night, before her shift started, she'd step into the cramped, greasy staff bathroom. First, she'd pull out the cheap, overly sweet floral perfume, Lavender Dream, it was called, and douse herself. From there, she'd pull her long dark hair into a messy bun, tucking stray strands under a worn baseball cap. And then, the final touch, sliding her thick-rimmed, unfashionable glasses onto her nose, effectively dimming the unnatural sheen of her pale silver eyes. No one looked twice at the quiet, mousy waitress in the 24-hour diner. That was the point. She moved between tables, wiping down sticky surfaces with practiced, almost invisible movements. A few truckers sat hunched over plates, their faces illuminated by the glow of small TVs showing late-night sports. Lucia preferred the graveyard shift because it meant fewer people, fewer eyes, much less noise. Her Omega senses, dormant for so long, still occasionally picked up on the emotional currents around her. A trucker's quiet loneliness, a young couple's fleeting argument. What followed was a dull ache behind her eyes, a whisper of a headache that only worsened when strong emotions swirled too close. Not only that, but strong emotions sometimes stirred something else inside her, a faint, ancient hum, like a forgotten song trying to play. This is why she craved silence. This is why she hid. Her goal every night was simple: survive. Earn enough money to pack up her meager belongings and disappear again, maybe to a different state, maybe a different country. She'd been doing this for years, since Mrs. Elena, the kind librarian who'd taken her in after the fire, had taught her to blend in. Truth be told, Mrs. Elena had been a true angel, a wise woman who somehow understood the deep, terrifying magic Lucia carried, and then, she'd vanished too, just like everything else Lucia had ever loved. Moments later, the chime over the diner door jingled softly. A man walked in. He was tall, powerfully built, with dark hair and eyes like polished obsidian. Lucia felt a prickle of unease, a faint, discordant hum beneath the surface of the world, like a low cello string vibrating off-key. Because of that, her heart skipped a beat. This wasn't a trucker. He moved with a quiet, dangerous grace, like a predator in plain sight. Even so, he just sat in a booth near the back, his gaze sweeping the empty tables. He looked like he was waiting. For what? Lucia didn't know what scared her more, the unsettling hum his presence created, or the almost instinctive urge to run and hide from him, even though he hadn't even looked at her directly. The subtle scent of pine and damp earth, foreign and powerful, seeped into the diner's stale air. It was a new smell, sharp and wild. What followed was a tightening in Lucia's chest. Her careful calm was unraveling, thread by fragile thread. This man was different, and his presence here, it felt like the very first crack in her carefully constructed invisible shield. The strange man's presence lingered like a dark cloud, making the diner feel smaller, colder. After that unsettling feeling arrived, every nerve ending in Lucia's body felt stretched taut. She mumbled something about cleaning supplies to a bewildered night cook, because she needed an excuse to step outside. And then, she slipped out the back door, into the cool, damp alley. Rain lashed down, a welcome sting against her overheated skin, instantly washing away the cloying perfume, but it couldn't wash away the subtle, wild scent of the man inside. She leaned against the brick wall, gulping in the fresh, rain-soaked air. The streetlights cast long, dancing shadows, making the alley seem even more isolated. And then, a low murmur of voices drifted from further down the alley, near the dumpsters. Two figures, truckers, by their rough clothes huddled under a makeshift tarp, their voices hushed and frantic. Lucia didn't mean to listen, but her ears, even dulled, picked up the fear in their tone. Maybe it was fate that put her out there, at that exact moment. Swore it was true, Frank. One man grumbled, his voice thick with fear. Whole family gone. Just poof. And the claw marks, they said. Big as your head. Nah, that's just local legend. The other, Frank, tried to dismiss. Bad bears probably, or some new cultists. Nobody sees them anymore, not really. What followed was a chilling snort from the first trucker. Cultists don't leave trees ripped out of the ground. Frank, and the police? They ain't saying nothing. Just, don't worry folks, everything's under control.
Yeah, right.
Because of that, folks are packing up, leaving, moving away from the forest and the mountains. Lucia felt a cold dread trickle down her spine. Claw marks. Whole family's gone. It sounded too much like old stories, the ones whispered in hushed tones by her parents before the fire, before everything went dark. The noise from the diner stranger intensified, a deep, unsettling hum that seemed to resonate with the fear in the truckers' voices. It was a clear echo of the past, a feeling she'd tried to bury for so long. She didn't know what scared her more, the chilling talk about the animal attacks or the growing awareness of her own body trembling, a deep, primal response to the unsettling tales. Suddenly, a distant sound cut through the rain, a low, mournful howl. It didn't sound like a regular dog. It sounded like something wild, something hungry. And then it was followed by another, closer. Lucia's breath hitched. Her suppressed wolf, usually quiet, gave a low, almost imperceptible whine, deep within her. It was a plea, a warning, danger. She felt exposed, vulnerable. Because of that howl, the hair on her arms stood on end. She needed to get back inside, fast. The world outside, the human world she tried so hard to blend into, was no longer safe. And the man inside, the one whose scent now seemed to fill the very air around her, he was at the center of it. She felt it. She couldn't shake the feeling that his presence was a dark cloud, pulling the storm right to her doorstep. Lucia slipped back into the diner, trying to look normal. The truckers from the alley had dispersed, their fears fading into the background, but the new man, the stranger, was still there. He hadn't moved. Still, his presence felt bigger now, filling the entire space. His scent, that sharp, wild pine and damp earth, was stronger, clinging to the fabric of her uniform, making her nose tingle. What's worse, her headache had spiked, throbbing behind her eyes with the intensity of his unseen power. She headed straight for the coffee machine, her hands shaking slightly as she refilled the carafe. Her gaze flickered to him, and then he looked up, his eyes now visible in the diner's dim light. Were not obsidian, but a startling, predatory gold like molten metal. The moment their eyes locked, something inside Lucia shifted. Her suppressed Omega instincts, buried for years, screamed at her. Run, hide, he sees you. It was a raw, primal surge that felt like ice water in her veins, because she understood something deep in her bones. This was a hunter, and she was seen. He stood up, tall, powerfully built. He moved towards the counter, his steps silent, deliberate. Every heartbeat felt like a drum. Lucia's breath caught in her throat. She fumbled with the coffee carafe, nearly dropping it. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice trembling. Barely a whisper. She hated how weak she sounded. "Control yourself, Lucia." She fought against the panic, but it was like trying to hold sand in her fist. He stopped directly across from her. The space between them burned with an unspoken energy. He leaned forward, his voice a low rumble, like distant thunder. "You smell different." Lucia's heart skipped a beat. Had he smelled her? Despite the perfume? No matter how hard she tried, her masking scent was never perfect. I just finished cleaning." She tried to sound casual, normal, but her throat felt dry as dust. He scoffed, a soft, almost amused sound that sent shivers down her spine. No, his gaze intensified, stripping away layers. Beneath the flowers, there's something else. He paused, his eyes narrowed, as if he was truly seeing her for the first time. Something familiar. Lucia's blood ran cold. Familiar? Had he known her pack? Was he one of them? A Shadow Scars hunter coming back to finish the job? The question screamed in her mind, unanswered. She took a step back, bumping into the coffee machine, the memory of her mother's scream. Whisper wind flashed. He stepped forward. His scent, now overwhelming, wrapped around her, wild and possessive, thick as velvet. It wasn't just a smell, it was a feeling, a deep pressure. His golden eyes never left hers, burning through her disguise, stripping away every ounce of her fabricated normalcy. Before she could move, his large hand shot out, not to grab, but to gently yet firmly cup her jaw. His touch was electric, a jolt that went straight to her bones. Her Omega wolf, awakened by his touch, pulsed, a weak, confused whine in her head. And just like that, everything changed. The world outside, the human world, ceased to exist. All that was left was his burning stare, his overwhelming scent, and the terrifying realization she wasn't invisible anymore. She was found. Kalen's growl. "What was that?" Still vibrated in Lucia's ears. It wasn't just a question, it was a demand. His golden eyes, sharp and intense, bore into her. She stood trembling, her Omega power still faintly humming in her veins, a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilarating thrill. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to hide that surge of energy, because it was too much. It brought back too many painful memories of being found. But his gaze felt like it peeled away her skin, seeing everything. I don't know," Lucia whispered, her voice rough. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to make herself smaller. I felt something, a bad feeling." She tried to sound innocent, like any human. She hated the way her voice shook, giving her away. Kalen stepped closer, his scent wrapping around her. It was heavy with his frustration, but also with that bewildering primal possessiveness. He pulled a folded map from his belt, spreading it on a nearby fallen log. It showed marked territories, scout routes. He pointed with a scarred finger. This symbol, it was the twisted flame and claw, the mark of the Shadow Scars, the mark from her nightmares. "You reacted to their magic, not just to the wolves. Tell me." His voice was low, laced with absolute command. He wouldn't let it go. Lucia felt cold dread. He knew. He felt the magic. He knew more than she ever thought possible. A specific memory, sharp and cruel, flashed in her mind. Her mother, pushing Lucia under the burning rubble, screaming, "Be silent," because of that memory. Lucia's throat tightened. What would he do if he knew the truth? If he knew she was a Whisper Wind Omega? She bit her lip, pressing her eyes shut. She couldn't tell him. She couldn't. It was too dangerous. But then, Kalen's powerful hand gently, carefully, took her chin, tilting her face up. His touch was unexpectedly tender. His golden eyes, though firm, held a deep, unspoken question. Not anger, just demand for honesty. "Lucia," he murmured. his voice softer now, almost a plea. "What are you hiding?" His voice filled the quiet forest, echoing with patience. She felt it, clear as day, his intense need to understand her. He was waiting, and the silence stretched, thick with unspoken secrets. She knew she had to tell him. It was no longer a question of if, but when. Kaylin's patient gaze broke Lucia's defenses. Her carefully built wall, guarded for years, crumbled into dust. Her voice was raw, a desperate whisper torn from her throat. My pack. They were the whisper wind." She spoke of the grove, the ancient trees. She spoke of her parents, peaceful Omegas who tried to keep balance. Her voice fractured, thick with ash and pain. She described the night of ashes, the brutality of the shadow scars, the burning, the screaming. They killed everyone, because they hated our gifts, because we were Omegas. What followed was a profound silence. Kaylin's hand on her jaw tightened, not in a grip, but in deep empathy. His golden eyes never left hers, filled with a raw, shared grief that mirrored her own. He then spoke, his voice low, heavy with his own burden. "My father, Alpha Thorn before me, he saw it." Lucia stared, disbelieving. Saw what? He saw the shadow scars, their monstrous cruelty. He tried to intervene. He led a small group of Ironwood warriors to help the Whisperwind, but they were too many, too brutal. Kaylin's voice was rough. He carried the guilt of it until the day he died. He spoke of your pack, Lucia, as a beacon of true Omega power, not a weakness, a vital strength they sought to destroy. Lucia felt her world tilt. It wasn't Kaylin's pack who killed her family. It was the shadow scars, the monsters of her nightmares, her entire life, her bitter hatred of all wolves, her belief that her Omega nature was a curse. It was all built on a terrifying misunderstanding. The shock was dizzying. Her Omega wolf, responding to the raw truth, stirred with a powerful, aching sorrow, but also with a strange sense of vindication. She wasn't to blame. Kaylin pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her. His strong body was a comforting anchor. He held her as she finally wept. Hot, silent tears for a past she thought she understood. She felt his grief, his silent shame, his deep respect for what her pack once was. This was the turning point. The Alpha who had terrified her was now sharing her pain. Their bond wasn't just physical. It was forged in shared ashes, a deeper connection than she could have ever imagined. She was not a captive. She was found. The next morning, Kaylin's cabin felt different. The air hummed with a new understanding between them. Lucia's eyes were still swollen, but a quiet resolve settled in her heart. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She had a purpose. Not only that, but she now saw Kaylin not as a captor, but as someone who carried a burden as heavy as her own. She wanted to help him. Later, Kaylin led her into a large communal room in the main pack house. Lyra was there, along with several other stern-faced wolves, gathered around a large map spread on a table. This was a strategic meeting. Lucia felt a prickle of nerves. Her legs trembled slightly. She had always hidden, always been the one listening from the shadows. But then, Kaylin looked at her. His gaze, warm and confident, silently asked her to contribute. He trusted her. Lucia was there, Kaylin announced to his inner circle, his voice firm. She saw the shadow scars, their methods, their movements. He gestured to the map. "Tell them what you remember." Lucia felt a rush of adrenaline. She took a deep breath. She spoke of the discordant energy the shadow scars radiated, how it sickened her senses. She described their strange, almost ritualistic way of moving, how they attacked in waves, aiming to disorient before striking. She spoke of the symbols they carried, and how they seemed to draw strength from chaos itself. As she spoke, her Omega power, now more awake, picked up nuances, the frustration in Kaylin's warriors, the quiet desperation in Lyra. "They seek to break more than bodies," Lucia said, her voice growing stronger. "They seek to break spirits, to break bonds." She explained how their magic aimed to corrupt, to twist, because that's what she felt the night her pack fell. It was an open loop in the pack's understanding. It was a new piece of the puzzle. Kaylin watched her, his golden eyes filled with pride. Lyra nodded, her expression impressed. Kaylin then laid out his plan, a preemptive strike against a known Shadow Scars outpost. Lucia listened intently, her mind racing. She saw the potential flaws, the hidden dangers. "Their magic, it's a shield. Almost," she murmured, thinking aloud. "It pushes pure energy away." Kaylin turned to her, his gaze sharp. "Can it be broken?" he asked. Lucia felt a surge of defiant power. Maybe, just maybe, her Omega essence wasn't a curse. Maybe it was the key. She looked at Kaylin, a silent vow passing between them. The stakes had been raised, and she was ready to fight. The air in the strategy room felt heavy. filled with tension and the scent of Kaylin's grim determination. After her outburst, after revealing her insights, Lucia felt a strange sense of purpose. She looked at the map, at the pinpointed Shadow Scars outpost. Kaylin's plan was risky, a preemptive strike to cut off their supplies before a larger ritual, but it was their chance. Their magical shield, it pushes pure energy away, Lucia murmured, thinking aloud. Her silver eyes scanned the drawn routes. It's like a wall of twisted noise. Kaylin turned to her. His golden eyes sharp. Can it be broken? He asked, his voice low, intense. Lucia's Omega Wolf hummed. She felt the answer deep in her gut. Maybe. Not by force, but by balance. She took a deep breath. I can go. My energy, it's pure. It might disrupt their twisted shield, because her essence was the opposite of theirs. She felt it. Kaylin's jaw tightened. He shook his head. Too dangerous. You're staying here. His voice was absolute. But then, he looked at her, his alpha senses surely picking up her stubborn resolve. No. Lucia stepped forward, her voice surprisingly firm. She met his gaze directly. This is my fight too. They destroyed my pack. Because of that, I have to be there. And you need me. You said my Omega power was vital. She wouldn't be left behind. She couldn't. Lyra, watching them, gave a small, approving nod. Kaylin's gaze swept over her face, searching. He saw her determination, unwavering. The battle within him was clear in his eyes, his protective instinct warring with his tactical mind. He saw the fire in her silver eyes, not weakness, but a potent, ancient strength. One mistake. Lucia, he warned, his voice rough. I won't make one, she vowed, her voice steady. She felt it clear as day, a profound shift. She wasn't just a survivor anymore, she was a warrior. She was ready to face the darkness, hand in hand with the alpha who had claimed her. And just like that, the silent vow was made. She was committed. The forest air was thick with tension. Lucia moved silently alongside Kaylin's warriors, her heart thumping a quick, anxious beat. Kaylin, magnificent in his wolf form, was a dark shadow moving through the trees ahead. His scent was a constant anchor, a deep, grounding force in the rising anxiety. This was it, the Shadow Scars convoy. They could hear the rumbling of heavy vehicles now, surprisingly close. Kaylin gave the signal. The Ironwood wolves moved like ghosts, surrounding the convoy, before the Shadow Scars even knew what hit them. The ambush was swift, precise. But then, as the corrupted wolves began to fight back, their dark magic flared, creating a shimmering, almost invisible shield around their supplies, pushing away the Ironwood warriors with blasts of chaotic energy. Lucia felt the repulsive force of the shield, a sickening resonance that tried to claw at her mind. Her Omega power surged. It was like a sudden brilliant light blooming beneath her skin. She closed her eyes for a moment, focusing. She pushed back against the chaotic energy, not with force, but with a pure, steady wave of her own. The shield flickered, it shimmered to one crack, it fractured, like thin ice. The Shadow Scars recoiled, shocked. Because of that, the Ironwood wolves surged forward, their growls of triumph echoing through the trees. Lucia, her senses now fully alive, felt the enemy's confusion. She saw their fear. She moved through the chaos, her silver eyes glowing faintly, like twin moons. She wasn't fighting with teeth and claws, but with her very essence. She disrupted their spells. She shifted their discordant energies. She created openings for Kaylin's warriors. But then a chilling snarl cut through the air. One of the Shadow Scars, larger and darker than the others, broke free, its eyes fixed solely on Lucia. It knew her. It knew what she was. It moved with terrifying speed, aiming straight for her unprotected throat. Kaylin, seeing the danger, let out a furious roar. He launched himself forward, a blur of muscle and fur, but the rogue was too close. Without warning, a sharp pain lanced through Lucia's arm as the rogue's claws raked her. She gasped, stumbling back. Her Omega power flared, a desperate burst that sent the rogue reeling. Giving Kaylin the chance he needed, he slammed into the Shadow Scar, a whirlwind of teeth and fury, tearing it apart. He then turned to Lucia, his wolf eyes filled with a terrifying mix of relief and feral possessiveness. The touch had been brief, painful, but it had unlocked something more within her. The adrenaline from the ambush slowly faded, leaving Lucia shaken but strangely exhilarated. Her arm burned where the rogue had clawed her, but Kaylin was there, his concern a tangible weight. He shifted back, his clothes reappearing, his golden eyes never leaving her injured arm. He gently tended to the wound, his touch rough but incredibly tender. This was the raw Kaylin, the protector. Later, back at the main pack house, the victory was celebrated, but a new tension hummed beneath the surface. The Shadow Scars had reacted strongly to her presence. Kaylin led Lucia to the great hall, where the entire pack was gathered. Her heart pounded. This was it. Kalen stood before his pack, his voice clear and resonant. We secured the convoy, but it was not without cost, and it was not without a revelation. His golden eyes swept over the pack, then landed on Lucia. The shadow scars knew who she was. They hunted her because of her power. Her Omega essence disrupted their magic in ways we never thought possible. He gestured to her. This is Lucia. She is a whisper wind Omega. She is my mate. What followed was a moment of profound silence. Whispers rippled through the gathered wolves. They stared at Lucia, curiosity mixing with awe. Lyra stepped forward, her voice strong. Lucia fought with us. Her power saved lives today. She is the balance Kalen speaks of. Kalen then looked at Lucia, his gaze unwavering. He reached out, taking her hand, his thumb tracing the faint lines of her palm. His voice was a deep, sacred vow, echoing through the silent hall. You are the balance to my chaos. You are the truth my pack needs. You are my Luna, and my everything. He pulled her closer, his gaze fierce, possessive, utterly devoted. With you, we are whole. It was a promise, a commitment. Her heart swelled. Lucia met his gaze, her own silver eyes shining. The pack's collective emotions, once a bewildering noise, now felt like a chorus of acceptance, warm and inviting. She felt it clear as day. She was not alone anymore. She was home. She was their Luna. But then, a scout burst in, his face pale, breathing heavily. Alpha, they're coming, more, faster than before. They're heading for the ancient summoning grounds. They're preparing for a massive ritual. They want the Luna. The stakes had been raised. The personal had become terrifyingly public. The Shadow Scar's leader's clawed fingers brushed Lucia's cheek. His touch was icy, malevolent. It wasn't just physical cold, it was the feeling of a profound emptiness, a chaotic void that tried to swallow her whole. In that very moment, as despair threatened to consume her, something shifted. Her Omega senses, pushed to their absolute limit, pierced through the leader's monstrous facade. She saw his truth, not just evil, but a gaping, consuming emptiness. His power wasn't true strength. It was just an endless hunger, feeding on discord. What followed was a sudden, fierce spark of defiance. Lucia's mother's voice, a soft whisper from long-buried memory, echoed in her mind. Balance, truth. It wasn't a curse. It was a purpose. Her silver eyes, previously dim with despair, snapped open. They didn't just gleam. They blazed with a quiet, ancient fire, startling even the hulking rogue leader. She was no longer just a victim waiting to be devoured. She was a guardian, because this time, she wouldn't hide. She wouldn't let fear win. Without warning, Lucia pushed, not with physical force, but with a sudden concentrated wave of pure, resonant energy, her Omega essence unleashed. It hit the leader like an invisible wall, a jarring counterforce to his chaotic emptiness. He recoiled, grunting in surprise, his cruel smile faltering. It bought her a precious second. Lucia scrambled towards Kalen, who lay still, his golden aura barely a flicker. Her heart pounded, but it was no longer a beat of terror. It was a war drum. She reached him, her hands trembling as she hovered over his chest. She could feel his essence, his strong alpha wolf struggling against the dark magic, fighting a losing battle. He needed her. His weakness called to her, like a siren song. Kalen, she whispered, her voice raw with newfound determination. She didn't know if he could hear her. His face was pale, his breathing shallow. The surrounding chaos of the shadow scars, their triumphant roars, seemed to dim, becoming background noise. All that mattered was the fading light of her mate. She knew what she had to do. She had to reach deep inside herself, past the fear, past the trauma. Because he fought for his pack. Now, she would fight for him. She had to. In that moment, a desperate plan, born from instinct and the echoes of her ancient power, began to form in her mind. She would pull him back. She would not let him go. Lucia didn't think. She acted. She pressed her hands onto Kalen's chest, directly over his heart, feeling the faint, erratic beat. She closed her eyes, shutting out the horrifying chaos of the battle, the sounds of her pack struggling. She focused solely on Kalen's essence, that deep, strong root that was his alpha wolf. What followed was a surge of her own Omega energy, a pure silver light blooming beneath her skin. She pushed it into him, channeling every ounce of her being, every bit of her awakened gift. It felt like singing a silent, ancient song directly into his soul. Her Omega energy worked like a living counterspell. It met the dark magic invading Kalen's body, not by force, but by balancing and purifying it. It felt like cleansing murky water, slowly dissolving the vile corruption. She felt the heavy burden lift from him, bit by bit. She felt his alpha aura, once a dim spark, slowly begin to flicker brighter, stronger. It was like coaxing a dying flame back to life. Meanwhile, she also focused on the Ironwood pack. Through their mate bond, through the resonance of her Omega nature, she sent out a wave of unifying energy. It was a silent call, a desperate plea that resonated with their innate loyalty, rekindling their fighting spirit. She felt their despair lift, their resolve harden, their attacks grew sharper, their howls became fierce. Kalen gasped, a sudden, ragged breath. His golden eyes snapped open, blazing with renewed power. They locked onto Lucia's, filled with a profound mix of shock, awe, and an overwhelming, possessive devotion. He rose, pushing himself up, his powerful alpha form shimmering into full vitality. He was back. Not only that, but he was more. His alpha aura, now touched by Lucia's Omega essence, felt balanced, luminous, and incredibly strong. He let out a thunderous alpha roar, a sound that echoed through the entire forest, shaking the very ground. It was a roar of renewed purpose. A challenge. It was a promise. It was a vow. The Ironwood pack responded. Their howls now unified, sharp, filled with a renewed savagery that surprised even the shadow scars. Kalen looked at Lucia, his gaze burning, a silent vow passing between them. They were a force, together. Now, the final push. They had to stop the ritual. The fate of their world hung in the balance. Kalen roared, a thunderclap of renewed purpose that rippled through the trees. The Ironwood pack responded. Their howls now fierce, unified. The tables had turned. Lucia stood beside Kalen, her heart pounding, but not with fear, with defiant power. Her Omega energy hummed steadily, a clear, pure beacon against the lingering chaos. She felt it, clear as day, the subtle shift in the shadow scars resolve. They were confused, they were faltering. To the summoning grounds. Kalen barked, his voice sharp, decisive. He didn't wait. He launched himself forward. A dark, powerful wolf, leading the charge. Lucia ran alongside him, her human legs surprisingly fast, fueled by adrenaline and the raw surge of her Omega energy. Lyra, recovered in fighting with renewed ferocity, moved to cover their flank, her gray fur a blur. Lucia used her gift, a silent weapon in the war. She would focus her energy, sensing the discordant pulses of the shadow scars. Push. A subtle wave of pure energy would hit them, disorienting their movements, making their dark magic flicker and stumble. Because of her, Ironwood warriors found openings they hadn't seen before. What followed was a seamless dance of power and strategy. Kalen would tear through the enemy, and Lucia would follow, clearing the path with her unseen force. She felt like an invisible shield, a guiding light. Meanwhile, the Shadow Scar's leader, seeing his forces pushed back, let out a frustrated snarl. He knew they were coming for him. He focused his remaining energy, pouring it into the growing, dark vortex at the center of the clearing, the ancient summoning grounds. The air there twisted, thick and suffocating with corrupted magic. He was trying to complete his ritual, to twist the very essence of mate bonds and Omega lineages forever. The stakes were immense. It was a desperate race against time. Lucia ran harder, every muscle screaming, fueled by the scent of Kalen's unwavering resolve. She felt his fierce determination, his need for justice, his absolute focus on stopping the evil. The air thickened as they neared the clearing, the stench of decay and dark magic becoming overwhelming. She could see it now, the twisted energy rising, forming a dark column, a monument to chaos. Her Omega essence cried out against it, a silent protest. They were almost there. The final confrontation was upon them. The air at the summoning grounds crackled with malevolent energy. The Shadow Scar's leader, a grotesque, hulking beast, stood before a swirling vortex of dark magic. He was pouring his will into it, trying to twist the very essence of mate bonds and Omega lineages forever. Lucia ran, her heart pounding a furious rhythm, her silver eyes blazing. Kalen, a blur of dark fur, was right beside her. He let out a thunderous alpha roar, a challenge that shook the very ground. The final confrontation was here. The leader snarled, diverting a sliver of his dark magic, sending a corrosive blast toward Kalen. Kalen met it head on, his body absorbing the impact, but he staggered. This was it. The moment. Lucia knew what she had to do. She pushed herself forward, stepping between Kalen and the malevolent vortex, her Omega energy surging like a protective tide. She didn't feel fear now, she felt absolute resolve. With a deep breath, Lucia unleashed her full power. It wasn't a roar, not a blast of force. It was a pure, resonant wave of truth and balance, a silent song that pulsed from her very core. It crashed against the Shadow Scar's dark ritual, meeting chaos with order, sickness with purity. The swirling vortex of dark magic shuddered. It wavered, then crack. It shattered, like brittle ice under a sledgehammer. The corrupted energy dissipated, purifying the polluted air with cleansing light. The Shadow Scar's leader screamed, a sound of pure agony and fury. As his source of power dissolved, he staggered back, weakened. Lucia pressed forward, focusing her intensified Omega power. She hit him with a sustained, pure Omega song, not sound, but resonant energy that ripped through the leader's chaotic essence. It peeled back his monstrous form, revealing the gaping emptiness, the profound void at his core. He was consumed by nothingness. This exposure, this deep, internal disruption, made him vulnerable. He swayed, his strength draining away. Kalen, seeing the opening Lucia had created, moved with lightning speed. He launched himself at the Shadow Scar's leader, his powerful alpha form a blur of focused rage. His golden eyes, now burning with purified power from Lucia's touch, glowed with absolute justice. He tore into the leader, not with senseless fury, but with brutal, precise blows that struck at his core. The grotesque monster thrashed, but it was no match for a balanced alpha, fueled by the truth of his Omega. Kalen ended it, a swift, final act of justice. The Shadow Scar's leader fell, his dark essence dissipating into nothingness. The conflict was resolved. Lucia, standing over Kalen, knew they had won. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the panting breaths of the Ironwood warriors and the soft patter of rain. The air, once thick with decay and fear, now smelled clean, refreshed, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth, mixed with the sweet aroma of Lucia's Omega essence. Kalen shifted back, his clothes reappearing, his powerful form now weary but victorious. He knelt beside her, his golden eyes filled with profound awe. He then pulled her into a fierce, all-encompassing embrace. His touch was everything: relief, raw possessiveness, and an unspoken, overwhelming love. Lucia leaned into him, utterly exhausted, but filled with a peace she hadn't known possible. She felt it clear as day, the subtle hum of his pack's collective relief, their gratitude, their overwhelming respect for Kalen, and for her. The Shadow Scars, those who hadn't been killed or fled, dispersed, their power broken. Their threat was truly over. Soon after, Lyra approached, her face streaked with dirt, but her eyes shining with pride. "Alpha," she said, her voice husky. She looked at Lucia, a silent vow of loyalty passing between them. The wounded were tended to, their howls of pain slowly turning into grateful murmurs as Ironwood healers began their work. Kalen and Lucia watched them, their hands clasped. What followed was Kalen's gaze. It swept over his pack, powerful and reassuring. He then turned back to Lucia, his golden eyes blazing with an unshakable resolve. He stepped forward, pulling her gently to stand before the gathered pack. The surviving Ironwood wolves looked on, their faces filled with anticipation. He didn't just state facts. He poured his soul into his words. "We have fought a great darkness today," Kalen announced, his voice clear and resonant, echoing through the now calm clearing. "We have faced the corruption that sought to break us all." His gaze locked onto Lucia's, fierce and absolute. "But we were saved, by her, by the truth and balance of her very essence." He raised their joined hands, their fingers intertwined. "This is Lucia, my mate, my Luna." He pulled her closer, his gaze fierce, possessive, utterly devoted. "With you, we are whole." It was a public vow, a promise, a commitment that resonated through every fiber of Lucia's being. Lucia's heart swelled, filled with a sense of belonging she'd only ever dreamed of. The pack howled, a thunderous chorus of acceptance and loyalty that vibrated through the ground. It was a sound of unity. Not only that, but Kalen then turned, pulling Lucia with him, and together, they faced their pack. They were Alpha and Luna, not just by blood, but by spirit. Their journey had been hard, it had been terrifying, but it led here. Weeks turned into months. The Ironwood pack flourished under Kalen and Lucia's joint leadership. Kalen, now more balanced, learned to lean on Lucia's empathic wisdom. He valued her insights, her ability to sense the subtle emotional currents within the pack, because it made him a better alpha. She, in turn, learned to wield her Omega gifts with confidence, no longer fearing her power, but embracing it as a tool for healing and harmony. She helped resolve internal disputes. She soothed anxious young wolves. She became a true beacon of balance. What followed was a profound period of growth for everyone. They would often walk the newly purified lands together, Kalen a towering presence by her side, his scent a constant comfort. He would tell her stories of his father, of ancient pack laws, of the delicate balance of power between different shifter groups. Lucia would share tales of her Whisperwind ancestors, their knowledge of ancient rituals, their belief in truth and emotional resonance. Together, they began to forge new traditions, blending strength with compassion. Lucia no longer hid her silver eyes. They shone with a quiet confidence, a serene power that the pack had come to respect and cherish. She had gone from a silent, terrified outcast to a powerful, beloved Luna. Kalen, once an isolated leader burdened by his own strength, was now grounded by her presence, his heart open, his rule imbued with a new, profound purpose. Eventually, the soft scent of rain and old parchment mixed with the earthy tones of pine and earth. Lucia felt it clear as day, a new life beginning, a tiny precious heartbeat. Years later, Kaelin and Lucia stood side by side, powerful and serene. They watched their cubs, a fierce boy with Kaelin's golden eyes and a quiet girl with Lucia's luminous silver ones, play in the sun-drenched clearing. Their story became a legend, the silent Omega, once shattered by the past, who, with her alpha mate, brought down an ancient evil and forged a new path of strength and unity for their kind. True power, they proved, lay not in dominance, but in balanced partnership and profound love. Their new world was built on a foundation of truth and harmony. The scouts' frantic words ripped through the celebratory air in the great hall like a jagged claw. They're coming. For the Luna, the shock of it, the sudden, terrible shift from triumph to impending doom, hit Lucia like a physical blow. Kaelin's golden eyes hardened, turning to solid gold, reflecting the fierce resolve of an alpha protecting his own. He roared orders, his voice a thunderclap that cut through the pack's sudden panic. Wolves scrambled, weapons were readied. Kaelin pulled Lucia to his side, his hand clamping around hers, a silent vow in his touch. She felt it, clear as day, the frantic thrum of his pack's fear, mixed with their unwavering loyalty to him. What followed was chaos. Not long after, a horrifying wave of discordant energy slammed into the pack house walls, shaking them to their very foundation. The air outside grew heavy, thick with the stench of something foul, burnt magic and decaying flesh. The shadow scars. They weren't just attacking, they were bringing their corrupted rituals to Ironwood lands. Dark, grotesque figures, half wolf, half nightmare, emerged from the forest's edge. Their eyes glowed with malevolent green light, their snarls ripped through the night, a symphony of pure evil. Lucia gasped. Her Omega senses were overwhelmed. The noise was unbearable, a cacophony of twisted emotions, pain and hate that clawed at her mind. It felt like being submerged in freezing, muddy water. She instinctively pushed back with her own pure energy, but their corrupted magic was a crushing weight, draining her strength. Because their power fed on chaos, it felt endless. Kaelin roared, a primal sound of fury, and shifted, transforming into a massive dark wolf with glowing gold eyes. He launched himself into the fray, a whirlwind of teeth and claws. Lyra and the other Ironwood warriors followed, a disciplined wave, but even their bravery seemed to falter against the sheer, overwhelming darkness. Lucia saw them struggle. Their movements became sluggish, their growls weaker. The corrupted energy was draining them, like a slow poison. More importantly, the Shadow Scar's leader, a hulking brute with eyes like stagnant pools, appeared at the front, directing the chaos with sinister ease. He wasn't even fighting directly. He was merely observing, his gaze sweeping the battlefield, looking for something, or someone. His eyes landed on Lucia. A slow, cruel smile stretched his grotesque face. He snarled, a low, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate directly in her mind. Luna, we've come for you. The stakes were now higher than ever before. Lucia felt a renewed surge of fear, a cold hand squeezing her heart. She was the target. She was the key. She didn't know what scared her more, his words, or the utter despair she felt for Kaelin's struggling pack. The Shadow Scars surged forward, their corrupted magic intensifying, pressing the Ironwood pack harder. Kaelin was a whirlwind of power, but Lucia felt his exhaustion through their bond, a weariness creeping into his every move. The pack was faltering. Because of the pervasive corruption, their natural healing was slowed, their strength sapped. They looked desperate. Lucia tried to push her Omega energy outward, a calming, clarifying wave, but it felt like pushing against a concrete wall. The Shadow Scar's magic was too thick, too vile. What followed was a rising panic. She felt helpless. All those years, hiding her power, believing it was a curse, had she lost the chance to make it strong enough? Meanwhile, the Shadow Scar's leader, a hulking wolf with eyes that seemed to suck in light, began a low, guttural chant. Dark energy swirled around him, coalescing into a viscous, black projectile. It launched, swift and silent, aimed directly at Kaelin, who was locked in a brutal fight with 3 rogues. Kaelin roared, but it was too late. The blast slammed into him. He staggered back, a choked sound escaping his throat. His powerful alpha form flickered, a sickening shimmer, before he stumbled, falling to one knee. His golden eyes, usually so vibrant, dimmed. The pure essence of his alpha aura, normally a beacon, became weak, struggling. Lucia gasped. No, she tried to rush to him, but Lyra, fighting near her, grabbed her arm. Stay back. Luna, you're the target. Lyra roared, her own voice strained. Lyra, a blur of gray fur, then lunged forward. trying to draw attention away from Kaelin, but a swift, brutal swipe from a Shadow Scar's rogue sent Lyra sprawling. Her body hitting a tree with a sickening thud, she crumpled, unmoving. Lucia stared, numb with shock. Lyra, Kaelin, both down. Hope dwindled, like a guttering flame in a hurricane. She felt Kaelin's essence, faint and struggling, trying to fight the invasive dark magic. But then, the Shadow Scar's leader, his lips drawn back in a cruel, triumphant sneer, began to walk towards her. He knew Kaelin was down. He knew she was the key to his ultimate victory. His eyes, cold and dead, were fixed on her. The Luna, so much power wasted, he rasped, his voice a grating whisper. Lucia felt a crushing despair. She couldn't fight. She couldn't hide. She was truly alone. She felt it clear as day, the bitter taste of utter defeat. She was at her lowest point. The night descended, colder than any winter. The Shadow Scar's leader stalked towards Lucia, his grotesque form casting a monstrous shadow. Kaelin lay still, his once vibrant golden aura flickering like a dying ember. Lyra was unmoving. It was over. Lucia's heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat of terror and despair. Her Omega power, usually a warm hum, felt numb, paralyzed by the sheer weight of the encroaching darkness. It was like trying to sing with a throat full of ash. The leader stopped before her. He raised a clawed hand, his fingers unnaturally long, reaching for her face. His scent was a sickly sweet miasma of decay and triumph. The whisper wind's last echo, he hissed, his voice like grinding stone. You will serve the new age. Your purity will fuel our eternal chaos. He intended to corrupt her, to twist her own essence into a weapon against all that was good. Lucia felt a scream trapped in her throat. Her mind flashed to the night of ashes, her mother's face, defiant, her father, standing strong. Then, the fire, the Shadow Scars, the overwhelming noise that had driven her to suppress everything. She had buried her power, believing it was a curse. She had feared it, because it attracted monsters, and now, that fear had brought the monster right to her. This is my fault. I wasn't strong enough. I never was. This was the culmination of her deepest, most chilling belief. In that moment, she felt utterly alone. Kaelin was gone. Lyra was gone. Her pack, Ironwood, was falling. What could she do? She was just a silent Omega, a broken whisper against a roaring storm. Her silver eyes, usually so luminous, were dim with despair, reflecting the leader's triumphant sneer. She had failed everyone. She had failed herself. She felt it clear as day, the bitter taste of utter defeat. This was the end. Her body trembled, not from cold, but from profound helplessness. The leader's clawed fingers brushed her cheek. His touch was icy, malevolent. He started to laugh, a low, guttural rumble that swelled into a triumphant roar, echoing through the besieged forest. The sound was a symphony of despair. The Ironwood pack's howls of defiance turned into cries of agony. All seemed lost. Lucia closed her eyes, preparing for the end, ready to succumb to the darkness that threatened to consume her. Her internal world, usually a careful balance, had shattered. She embraced the void. Lucia woke to a cabin filled with pale sunlight. Her body felt strangely light after a full night's sleep, a deep, dreamless rest she hadn't had in years. The scent of pine and Kaelin's subtle, wild aroma still clung to the thick blankets, a constant, gentle reminder of her new reality. She was no longer fighting, she was here. What followed was a quiet sense of something akin to peace, mixed with the ever-present hum of fear. Yet, it was a different kind of fear now, less about immediate danger, more about the unknown. Lyra, Kaelin's beta, entered soon after, carrying a fresh tray of food. Her sharp eyes scanned Lucia's face. You look better, she stated, her voice calm. Not a question, but a simple observation. Lucia nodded, taking the bread. It tasted like sunshine. Later that morning, Lyra led Lucia from the cabin. This was unexpected. Lucia's heart thumped a nervous rhythm against her ribs. What was happening? She saw it, the Ironwood pack's main settlement. It wasn't a village of scattered huts like she'd imagined, but a collection of sturdy log homes, workshops and training grounds nestled in a wide, natural clearing. Wolves moved with purpose, some in human form, some as massive, sleek beasts. A low, constant thrum of energy, pack unity filled the air, so different from the discordant chaos of her nightmares. Lucia felt it, clear as day, a powerful, organized rhythm. Lyra spoke quietly. Kaelin wants you to observe to understand how we work. She explained Lucia's temporary duties as helping her with administrative tasks, sorting supplies, organizing records. It was mundane work, designed to keep Lucia occupied, but it also placed her squarely in the heart of the pack's operations. Lucia's goal was to remain unseen, to observe without truly participating. because she still didn't trust them completely. But the sheer efficiency of their movements, the deep respect they held for Kalen, was undeniable. Meanwhile, she saw Kalen moving amongst his wolves. He was a force of nature, his presence commanding, his golden eyes missing nothing. He would bark an order, and it would be obeyed instantly. He was stern, but also fair. He looked tired sometimes. The heavy weight of leadership etched around his eyes. She hadn't expected that. He cared about his pack, because his gaze, though firm, held a deep protectiveness when he looked at his wolves, especially the pups playing nearby. She wondered, briefly, if he felt the same protectiveness toward her. But then, she shook the thought away. He is the alpha. I am a captive. I have to remember that. This new reality was confusing, because it didn't fit her old fears. It was a new world, one she had to learn to navigate, if she was ever to find her way home again, or create a new one. Days turned into weeks. Lucia continued her quiet observations, helping Lyra with the pack's daily tasks. Her initial fear of the wolves softened into a wary curiosity. She learned their rhythms, their unique sense, the unspoken rules that governed their every interaction. Not only that, but she started to notice the deeper currents of the pack, the subtle emotional bonds, the unspoken communication that flowed beneath their disciplined exterior. It was like learning a new language, one of feelings and instincts. One afternoon, a young pup, no older than 2 in human years, wandered away from its mother during training drills. It stumbled, whimpering, a tiny ball of distress. Lucia, without thinking, moved instinctively. She knelt, reaching out a tentative hand. Her Omega wolf, stirred by the pup's innocent fear, hummed faintly. She gently stroked its fur, and a wave of pure, calming energy flowed from her fingertips, settling the pup instantly. It leaned into her touch, its small tail giving a tentative wag. Lyra, who had been watching, approached slowly. Her sharp eyes, usually so guarded, held a flicker of something akin to awe. You calmed him," Lyra murmured, her voice soft. "He's usually so anxious. Kalen's cub, actually. He feels his father's burdens keenly." Lucia's hand froze. Kalen's cub? A pang shot through her, a mixture of surprise and a strange, unfamiliar warmth. She hadn't known he had children. She looked at Lyra, a silent question in her silver eyes. What followed was Lyra's quiet sigh. Alpha Kalen carries a heavy load, the shadow scars. They've been a plague for generations, not just to us, but to many packs. Lyra then spoke of the brutal history, of ancient treaties broken, of rogue wolves who reveled in chaos rather than harmony. She spoke of the Night of Ashes, her voice hushed, as a dark stain on all wolfkind's history, because it was an act of pure evil. Lucia listened, a cold dread mixing with a strange sense of vindication. Lyra spoke of an attempted intervention by Kalen's father, a desperate, failed attempt to save the Whisperwind pack. This was new. This was a direct contradiction to everything Lucia believed. Her parents always said it was the wolves who killed them, all wolves. Why was Kalen's father trying to help? Was it true? She wanted to believe it was, because it meant her past wasn't just mindless slaughter, but something more complex. She felt a growing curiosity about Kalen's father, about his pack's role. It was an open loop in her scarred memory, a question begging for an answer. The conversation with Lyra about the Night of Ashes haunted Lucia. Was it possible she had been wrong about all wolves? That the Ironwood pack, and Kalen's father, weren't the monsters she'd always believed? The questions churned in her mind, creating a restless energy. She needed answers. This is why she found herself walking near the edge of the Ironwood territory, under Lyra's watchful eye. Later that day, she was supposed to be gathering herbs, but her gaze kept sweeping the tree line, searching. Suddenly, Kalen emerged from the dense forest, his presence a raw surge of warning. His face was grim. "Trouble," he grunted, his golden eyes narrowed. He looked at Lyra, then his gaze locked onto Lucia's, shadow scars scouts. Before Lucia could process his words, they appeared. 3 hulking figures, not fully shifted, their forms rippling with dark, corrupted energy. Their scent was acrid, like burnt metal and decay, a smell that pierced Lucia's every defense, dragging her back to the fiery horror of her childhood. The noise. It was louder, more malevolent than anything she had felt since that night. This was a truly evil vibration, a dark song. It made her head ache. Kalen roared, a deep guttural sound that shook the very trees. He launched himself forward, a blur of dark fur and snapping teeth as he shifted fully into a massive, powerful wolf. He moved with brutal efficiency, engaging the lead rogue. Lyra, already halfway shifted, moved to cover their flank. Lucia froze. Primal terror seized her. This was it, the real enemy, the why of her parents' death, right before her eyes. But then, as the corrupted energy of the shadow scars tried to seep into her, a new sensation ignited within her, not fear, but a surge of pure, brilliant light. her own Omega energy, responding to the direct threat. She felt it, clear as day, a powerful, intuitive urge to push back. She didn't shift, couldn't, but her silver eyes blazed. She instinctively pushed her energy outward, a silent wave of resonant force. The nearest Shadow Scar's scout stumbled, its eyes wide with confusion, as if hit by an invisible wall. Its chaotic energy flickered, momentarily disrupted. Kaelin, seeing the opening, moved with lightning speed, disarming the rogue. The fight was quick, brutal. Kaelin and Lyra, acting as one, swiftly dispatched the remaining scouts. But then, Kaelin turned, his wolf eyes still gleaming, piercing Lucia with their intensity. What was that? His voice was a low growl, questioning, but also filled with awe. Lucia stood trembling, her Omega power humming, exhausted, but exhilarating. She didn't know what to say. She'd always buried it, but now, it had been revealed. The fight had opened a new, terrifying door, forcing her to see her gift as a weapon, not a curse. Kaelin's hand was on her jaw, firm and hot, like a brand searing her skin. His golden eyes, bright as burning coals, seared into Lucia's own silver ones. The raw power coming off him felt like a wave, pushing all the air from her lungs. Not only that, but a sharp, vibrating rumble suddenly shook the diner. Not the distant hum from before, but a violent, wrenching tremor. It was dark magic, strong and vile, pulling at the very air. Because the Shadow Scars were nearby, performing their twisted rites, causing chaos even in the human world. Above them, a heavy overhead light fixture groaned, then tore loose from the ceiling. It plunged downward, a lethal, spinning blur, directly towards Lucia's head. Without thinking, Kaelin moved. He lunged, a blur of dark clothes and powerful muscle, shoving her clear. The light fixture crashed where she'd been standing moments before, glass exploding, sending sharp shards scattering. Lucia stumbled, her heart hammering like a trapped drum inside her ribs. She was dazed, confused. She felt it, clear as day, a horrifying surge of pure malevolence from outside, a sick echo of her deepest nightmares. This evil had found her again. Kaelin's touch on her jaw tightened, pulling her face closer to his. His gaze burned, his scent pine and damp earth, now laced with something sharper, wilder, like ozone and raw power filled her lungs, claiming every inch of space. She tried to pull away, but his grip was unyielding. His eyes, fixed on hers, held a terrifying intensity that stole her breath. Mine, he growled, the word not a question, but a declaration, a primal roar that shook her to her core. Lucia tried to push away, her hands pressed against his chest, weak. No, her mind screamed. This can't be happening. Not him, not like this. Because he was danger, because his claim meant her freedom was gone. She felt the heavy weight of his gaze, crushing her under its intensity. The man from the alley, the powerful smell, the gold eyes, the trucker's warnings, all of it converged. This was not the safety she sought. This was the start of the end for her quiet life. Before either could speak, the diner manager, a burly man named Gus, looking pale and shaken by the tremor, stumbled out from the back, eyes wide with shock. What happened? He stammered, staring at the wreckage. Kaelin merely tightened his grip on Lucia. He looked at Gus. His eyes narrowed, and his voice was low, authoritative. She's with me. Family. She's shaken. Gus. Kaelin pulled Lucia out into the stormy night, his hold absolute. Just like that. Her world tilted. She was no longer invisible. She was claimed. The car ride was a blur of driving rain, and Kaelin's overwhelming scent. Lucia pressed herself against the window, trying to create distance, even though she knew it was pointless. Her mind spun, a whirlwind of panic and disbelief. Eventually, they pulled up to a secluded cabin, nestled deep in what felt like an endless forest. Pine trees, tall and dark, loomed like silent sentinels. The air here was sharp, clean, but still carried the faint, wild scent of wolf. This was their world, a secret world she had desperately avoided. Kaelin cut the engine. The sudden silence was heavy, broken only by the drumming rain on the roof. He turned to her, his profile sharp in the dim light. You'll be safe here, he rumbled, his voice low, firm. It sounded like a promise, or a command. What followed was Kaelin opening the car door. He pulled her out, his touch still sparking that terrifying jolt of the mate bond. Her Omega wolf whined, confused, safe, or trapped. The scent of pine and damp earth, so strong around him, promised both protection and absolute captivity. Inside the cabin was warm, smelled of pine and something distinctly masculine. A large stone fireplace cast dancing shadows. Kaelin led her to a simple room. It had a bed with thick blankets, a small table, nothing else. Rest, he ordered. His voice was flat, but then, his gaze lingered on her silver eyes, still wide with fear. He looked troubled. It made Lucia pause. Why? Why would he be troubled? She didn't understand him at all. A woman was waiting. She was tall, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense air. This was Lyra, Kaylin's beta. She looked at Lucia with a mix of curiosity and wariness. Kaylin spoke to Lyra in low tones. Lucia couldn't quite catch. He was giving orders. About her. Kaylin left, closing the door softly. Just like that. Lucia was a prisoner. Her immediate goal was still escape. She paced the small room, her heart pounding. She pushed against the sturdy window, trying to open it, but it wouldn't budge. She pressed her hands against the wooden door, locked. Later, Lyra brought her a tray of food. Thick stew. Fresh bread. The smell was good, but Lucia shook her head. I'm not hungry. She wouldn't eat. She wouldn't. She would show them she was not a willing captive. I want to go home, she whispered, her voice cracking. Lyra watched her, her expression unreadable. This is home now, Omega, Lyra said softly. Her words were gentle, but the finality in them felt like a cold stone. Because that's what this was. A new prison. Days blurred into a frustrating cycle. Lucia refused to eat. Refused to speak to Lyra unless absolutely necessary. She paced the small cabin, a caged animal. Lyra, however, was patiently relentless. She brought food, spoke quietly about the pack's needs, and never left Lucia alone. She didn't judge. This surprised Lucia. She knew pack members could be cruel to Omegas, seeing them as weak or lesser. So, why was Lyra so calm? Lucia's internal state was a constant battle between defiance and a growing weariness. She was tired of fighting, tired of the fear. Kaylin visited each evening. He never stayed long, never offered comfort. Instead, he watched her. His silence felt heavier than any chains. He'd leave a tray of food, his scent filling the small space, a constant reminder of his claim. Lucia felt it clear as day, the conflicting waves of his emotions, his relentless drive, his immense burden as alpha, and that confusing, underlying possessiveness that stirred something deep inside her own body, a heat that made her skin tingle despite her fear. Was this what it meant to be claimed? One evening, Kaylin found Lucia curled on the floor, weak from lack of food, but still stubbornly defiant. He knelt beside her, his face grim. You will eat, Lucia. His voice was low, but it held a steel edge that sent shivers down her spine. You are my mate. You will not starve yourself. He lifted a spoonful of thick, savory broth to her lips. She turned her head away, her jaw clenched. I won't be forced, she whispered, her voice rough. You can't make me. His gaze was intense. I can, and I will. He didn't threaten, he simply stated a truth. Because he was an alpha, and because she was his mate, her well-being was now his responsibility. He held the spoon steadily, waiting. The silence stretched between them, thick with his determination and her fading defiance. His scent, warm and protective, slowly began to seep into her pores. Her stomach rumbled. The warmth of the broth promised comfort, a deep, nourishing heat. She was so tired of fighting. Eventually, her defiance cracked. She slowly parted her lips, accepting the broth. It was warm, delicious. A wave of exhaustion washed over her. Kaylin watched her, his golden eyes softening just a fraction. He fed her, spoon by spoon, until the bowl was empty. She felt a profound sense of surrender. A beat later, she slept, the deepest sleep she'd had since he found her, wrapped in the comforting blanket of his powerful scent. She didn't know what scared her more, her surrender, or the quiet peace it brought.
Thank you so much for watching this video. We really appreciate you spending your time with us. If you enjoyed what you saw, we've got a whole library of other videos packed with more great content just like this waiting for you on our channel. So why not dive into another one right now? And hey, if you want to make sure you don't miss out on our next upload, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. We'd love to have you join our community and see you in the next video. Thanks again.